The women who taught me strength. You know, when I was younger, I thought strength looked like confidence. Like the kind of woman who always knew what to say, never cried at the wrong time, and could parallel park without breaking a sweat. But now I know better. Strength looks a lot more like my mother, holding everything together with one hand while stirring a pot with the other. It looks like a friend who answers the phone at 2 a.m. just to say, "I'm here." It looks like a woman who starts over, again, with quiet courage and a cup of tea. This is about those women, the ones who taught me what strength really means. Not the loud dramatic kind, but the kind that hums quietly beneath the surface of everyday life. The kind that builds families, heals hearts and carries generations forward. Because if you think about it, every strong woman we know was once taught by another. And this is for them. Welcome. Come on in, get comfy, and let's just sit a while. When I think about strength, I don't picture superheroes or movie scenes with triumphant music swelling in the background. I think about the women I've known. The ones who got up in the morning when they didn't want to, who kept going when no one was clapping, who did what needed to be done with grace, with grit, and sometimes, let's be honest, with a bit of grumbling. Those are the women who taught me strength. They didn't call it strength, of course. They called it life. They called it doing what you have to do. They called it making do or getting on with it. But looking back now, I see it for what it was, the quiet heroism of everyday women. My mother, for instance, could make a single pound stretch like elastic. She could find humour in hard times and comfort in a cup of tea. I used to think she was unshakable, but later I realised she wasn't unshakable. She just learnt to sway without falling. There's strength in that. Not the kind that roars, but the kind that whispers, "We'll be all right." Then there's my friends. The women who laughed their way through heartbreak, who held each other up through loss, who shared both the gossip and the grief. One of them once said to me, "If we waited until we felt strong to keep going, we'd never move at all." She was right. Strength, I think, isn't about never breaking. It's about finding the courage to piece yourself back together and helping someone else to do the same. And then there are the strangers, the women you pass briefly, but who leave a mark anyway. The nurse who squeezed your hand before a difficult diagnosis. The woman at the bus stop who complimented my scarf when I was having a terrible day, not knowing she'd made me feel seen. The older woman at the supermarket who winked at me when I looked overwhelmed, as if to say, "You're doing fine, love. You'll get the hang of it." They're all part of it, aren't they? The web of women who hold the world together with borrowed courage and shared compassion. We don't often get told that. We grow up seeing strength painted as something fierce, something loud, something commanding. But the truth is, some of the strongest women I've ever known have been the gentlest. They were the ones who stayed kind, even when the world wasn't. The ones who kept showing up for others, even when their own hearts were heavy. The ones who loved without needing to be thanked for it. My grandmother on my father's side is a prime example of one of these women. I never met my grandfather because he died very young, so my grandmother was left to raise their 4 children on her own. 2 girls, 2 boys. This was back in the times when there wasn't the help available that there is now. But somehow my grandmother got through it, like so many other women of her generation. She was an amazing woman, and I had a lot of respect for her. She was about 4'10" and just about as thin as a pencil, but frail She certainly was not. My grandmother had the purest heart and the warmest smile, but she protected her family with the strength of a tiger. I think of all those women, mothers, daughters, friends, neighbours, teachers, and I realise that strength doesn't always come in the form of grand gestures or defiance. Sometimes it's a soft voice saying, "I believe in you." Sometimes it's a woman holding someone else's hand through their storm, even while standing in their own. And maybe that's why women's strength can be so misunderstood, because it's not about power over others, it's about power with others. It's connection, compassion, the quiet insistence that life goes on, and so will we. When I was younger, I thought strong women were the ones who never cried. Now I know they're the ones who cry, wipe their eyes, and still get up the next morning. The ones who have the courage to be soft in a world that keeps trying to harden them. And if you're listening to this and thinking of a woman who fits that description, someone who carried you when you couldn't carry yourself, then you already know what I mean. That strength is a legacy. It's passed hand to hand, heart to heart. And every time one woman stands tall after being knocked down, she quietly makes it a little easier for the next one to rise. If I could gather all the women who shaped me into one room, every friend, mother, teacher, sister and stranger, I think I'd just sit quietly for a while and listen, because each one of them taught me something, not in lectures or lessons, but in the way they lived. One of the first lessons I learned was that strength doesn't always look the same. From some, I learned the strength of endurance, of staying when it would have been easier to leave. The kind of strength that gets you through the long nights, the unpaid bills, the quiet disappointments. They showed me that courage isn't always about making bold moves. Sometimes it's about staying steady when everything else is shifting. From others, I learned the strength of letting go, the ability to walk away from what no longer fits. A relationship, a dream, an old version of yourself, even when it hurts. That kind of strength doesn't shout, it whispers. You deserve peace. And then there's the strength of kindness. The women who smiled when they could have snapped, who offered grace when it wasn't earned, who forgave people, not because they forgot, but because they refused to let bitterness take root in their hearts. I think kindness might be the bravest form of strength there is, because it means choosing softness in a world that can be so hard. Another lesson I've carried is the strength of laughter. Women have an incredible ability to find humour in the most impossible situations. We laugh when we should cry, and cry until we laugh again. That laughter is a release, a rebellion even. A way of saying, you can't take my spirit, no matter how hard things get. I've learnt that strength doesn't mean having all the answers. Some of the wisest women I've known were the first to say, "I don't know, love, but we'll figure it out." That's strength too, admitting uncertainty, but showing up anyway. There's also a quiet dignity in the way women support one another. The way we rally, send messages, cook meals, check in, show up. When one woman is knocked down, the others gather around her like a circle of light. That's something truly powerful, that instinct to care. This was particularly relevant for me when my teenage daughter passed away very suddenly. The women in my life rallied to help in any way they could. It was obviously a very dark time, but there was a team around that wanted to help, needed to help. They did the cooking, they listened, they cried with me, they made sure I got out of bed in the morning, and they helped me smile again. They helped me start to live again, and for that I will be eternally grateful. And of course there's the strength of reinvention. How many times have we watched women start over in new jobs, new towns, new lives, and do it all with courage they didn't know they had? I've seen it again and again. Women who rebuild quietly, who carry their scars like medals, who say, "This isn't how I planned it, but I'll make it beautiful anyway." We learn strength not by watching perfection, but by witnessing resilience. And that's what these women gave me. Not flawless examples, but real ones. Women who fell apart sometimes, but always found their way back together. Who taught me that you can be soft and strong at the same time. That you can bend without breaking. That you can carry others even when your own arms are tired. Their lessons weren't written in books or spoken from stages. They were written in the small moments, the way they listened, loved, endured, and began again. And maybe that's what strength really is. A story told quietly over generations, from one woman's heart to another. There's a moment somewhere along the way when you realise you've become one of those women. The ones who hold others up, who offer the advice you once went searching for, who reach out with that same calm voice that used to comfort you. You don't notice it happening at first. You're just living, showing up, helping, listening, surviving. And then one day, someone turns to you and says, "You're so strong." And it stops you in your tracks. Because you don't feel strong. You feel like you're still figuring it out, still making it through. But then you remember, that's exactly what all those women before you felt too. They didn't think of themselves as extraordinary. They were simply doing what needed to be done the best way they could. And somehow, in doing so, they left you a map. Not of perfection, but of perseverance. And now it's your turn to carry it forward. Not by being unbreakable, but by being real. By showing others that strength isn't about never falling apart. It's about learning how to put yourself back together with tenderness and truth. When you sit beside a friend who's grieving, when you tell someone, "I've been there and I'm still here," when you choose kindness in the face of cruelty, you are continuing their legacy. Every gentle word, every shared laugh, every hand held through the hard days, that shows how women's strength endures. Not through grand declarations, but through the everyday sacred act of caring. Sometimes I wonder if this is what they meant when they said, "We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us." Sometimes the most empowering thing you can say to another woman is, "You don't have to be perfect. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to start again." Because that's where the real power lies. In permission, in compassion, in saying, "I see you and I know how hard you're trying." So here's to the women who taught me strength, and to the women still teaching it every single day, to the ones who came before, the ones beside me now, and the ones still finding their way. Because strength, real strength, isn't something we find, it's something we become. I think the older I get, the more I understand that strength isn't something you're born with, it's something you learn. Over cups of tea, over tears and laughter, by watching the women who came before you. And one day, without even noticing, you realise that their lessons live in you now. In the way you comfort a friend, or keep going when you're tired, or choose kindness instead of anger. That's their legacy, quietly shining through you. So if you're thinking of a woman who helped you become who you are, maybe give her a little moment in your heart. Or, if you can, tell her, thank you. Because that strength, that love, that courage, it didn't end with her. It continues every time you pass it on. Here's to the women who taught us strength. Here's to us, the ones still learning, still teaching, still standing side by side. If there's a special woman that helped you when you needed a little extra strength, feel free to honour them by leaving a comment below, say their name out loud, and take a moment to think of them fondly. Thank you for sharing your time with me. Take gentle care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.